https://www.youtube.com/watch?mark v=__.youtube.com/watch?markv=__CEO. What single dad saw behind billionaire's closed door stopped him cold. Những gì người cha đơn thân nhìn thấy sau cánh cửa đóng kín của tỷ phú đã khiến anh chết lặng một. Opening. A 32-year-old single father, Daniel Brooks, lives a quiet, disciplined life, working as a maintenance technician while raising his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie. One late night, he is called to fix an urgent issue in the penthouse of a 30-year-old CEO, Olivia Grant, known for her ruthless brilliance and emotional distance. But instead of a simple repair, Daniel accidentally witnesses Olivia alone, shattered, sitting beside a birthday cake meant for her daughter who died years ago. In that moment, he recognizes a grief identical to his own. 2. Rising action. Though both try to ignore the encounter, fate keeps bringing them together. When Sophie draws a rainbow with the words, "You are not alone," Daniel delivers it to Olivia. The simple gesture cracks her carefully built walls. Gradually, guarded silence turns into honest conversations. Daniel and Olivia begin to share their pain, his loss of his wife, her loss of her child, and a fragile connection forms between two people who understand each other in ways no one else can. 3. Climax. As Olivia slowly begins to heal, her past resurfaces violently. Her ex-husband manipulates powerful board members, using her relationship with Daniel as evidence that she is unstable and unfit to lead. A legal and corporate battle erupts, threatening to destroy everything she has built. Under immense pressure, Olivia nearly gives up, until she confronts the truth about her daughter's final wish, that she should live and be happy. That realization becomes her turning point. 4. Resolution. With Daniel standing beside her, Olivia faces the board and exposes the hidden motives behind the accusations. The truth dismantles the scheme against her. She proves not only her competence as a CEO, but also her strength as someone who chose healing over isolation. She keeps her company, and more importantly, she reclaims her sense of self. 5. Breakthrough and ending. In the months that follow, Olivia embraces a new life, one where she allows herself to feel, to connect, and to love again. Daniel and his daughter Sophie become a steady part of her world. Under a quiet sky painted with a rainbow, the three of them stand together, not replacing what they lost, but building something new from it. A broken CEO and a single father find hope in each other, forming an unexpected family shaped by resilience, love, and second chances. This is a fully fictional cinematic story created purely for entertainment. All characters, events, and settings are entirely imaginary. Marble floors, chandeliers that probably cost more than his annual salary, a doorman who wore white gloves. He'd been working maintenance here for 2 years, ever since he'd needed a job with flexible hours and decent pay. The work was straightforward. Fix things, stay invisible, don't ask questions. He took the service elevator to the 40th floor, watching the numbers climb while mentally cataloging what tools he'd need for a water leak. Probably something simple. Rich people panicked over things that could wait until morning, but they paid for the privilege of panic, so here he was. The penthouse hallway was silent, carpeted in something too plush to be practical. He knocked twice on the massive double doors, waiting. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. "Maintenance, you called about a leak?" Still nothing. He tried the handle, unlocked, and pushed the door open cautiously. "Ms. Grant, it's Daniel from maintenance. I'm coming in." The apartment sprawled before him like something from a magazine shoot. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked sculptural rather than comfortable, art on the walls that was probably worth more than his truck. Everything was pristine, color-coordinated, carefully curated. It didn't look like anyone actually lived here. He found the leak in the master bathroom, a loose connection under the sink, nothing serious. 10 minutes with a wrench, maybe less. He set his toolbox down and got to work, the familiar rhythm of turning metal against metal calming in its simplicity. This, he understood. This made sense. He was tightening the final connection when he heard it. A sound so quiet he almost missed it. A sob, sharp and quickly stifled, coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. Daniel froze. Every instinct told him to finish the job and leave. Whatever was happening wasn't his business. He didn't know Olivia Grant beyond the occasional interaction when something in her apartment needed fixing, and those interactions had taught him she preferred minimal conversation and maximum efficiency. But the sound came again, and something about it made his chest tight. He found her in what must have been a second living room, though it was smaller, tucked away from the main space. The lights were off except for a single lamp, and Olivia Grant, the woman whose face appeared in business magazines, who'd built a tech empire before turning 30, who reportedly made venture capitalists sweat during negotiations, was sitting on the floor beside a small table. On the table sat a birthday cake, pink frosting, rainbow sprinkles, a plastic unicorn figurine on top. One candle, unlit, and written in careful purple letters, Emma, happy 7th birthday. Olivia's back was to him, her shoulders shaking with the effort of crying silently. She was still dressed in what must have been her work clothes, a silk blouse, tailored pants, but her feet were bare and her hair had fallen loose from whatever style she'd worn it in that morning. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "So sorry, baby. Mommy's so sorry." Daniel should have left, should have backed out quietly, finished his paperwork downstairs, pretended he'd seen nothing. But he stood there, unable to move, because he knew that voice. Not hers specifically, but the tone of it, the weight of it, the sound of someone apologizing to a ghost. He must have made a noise, a shifted weight, a caught breath, because Olivia's head snapped up. She turned, and for a moment they just stared at each other. Her face was a mess. Mascara tracked down her cheeks, eyes red and swollen, expression raw in a way that made her look younger and infinitely more human than the polished executive he'd encountered before. She opened her mouth, probably to tell him to get out, to fire him, to threaten him with something if he ever spoke about this. But what came out was, "Is it fixed?" Her voice was steady, controlled, as if he hadn't just found her crying over a birthday cake for a child who wasn't there. "The leak, is it fixed?" Daniel's throat felt tight. Yeah, just a loose connection." "Good, thank you. You can send the invoice to management." She stood up, smoothing her blouse with shaking hands, rebuilding her composure piece by piece right in front of him. It was like watching someone put on armor. He should have left then, should have nodded and walked away and forgotten everything he'd seen. Instead, he heard himself say, "My wife died 3 years ago. Car accident." Olivia went still. Everyone kept telling me time would help, that it would get easier, that I'd move on. He looked at the cake, at the name written in purple frosting. They were wrong about the moving on part. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. "Emma was 5, Olivia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leukemia. 2 years ago last month." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition. The kind that comes from shared geography in a country nobody wants to visit. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, because what else was there? "Everyone's sorry." She turned away, facing the cake again. "Sorry doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." Olts. They stood there in the dim room, two strangers bound by the same terrible understanding. Daniel knew he should leave. Every professional instinct he had was screaming at him to walk away, to let this woman have whatever private grief she'd been drowning in before he arrived. But something kept his feet planted. "The cake," he said quietly. "Did you make it yourself?" Olivia's laugh was bitter. "I can't cook. I had it delivered from the bakery she loved. They remember her there. They still put the unicorn on top without me asking. That's good that they remember." "Is it?" She turned to face him again, and the expression on her face was so raw it hurt to look at. "Because sometimes I think it would be easier if everyone forgot, if I could just move forward, be the person I'm supposed to be, the CEO, the leader, the woman who has it all together." Her voice cracked. Instead of the mother who couldn't save her daughter. Daniel recognized that guilt. He wore it like a second skin. "I was supposed to pick her up that day," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. "My wife. But I got caught up at work, running late, so she took the bus instead. If I'd just left on time, if I'd just..." Don't! Olivia's voice was sharp. Don't do that to yourself. You do it too, I can see it. She looked away. That's different. How? Because I was her mother. I was supposed to protect her, and I couldn't. Her hands clenched into fists. I had all the money in the world, the best doctors, the best hospitals, and none of it mattered. I couldn't save my own daughter. The pain in her voice was so familiar it made Daniel's chest ache. He'd had those same thoughts 1,000 times. At 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. In the shower, where nobody could hear him break. Standing in Sophie's doorway watching her sleep, terrified that the universe would take her too. You can't save people from everything, he said quietly. No matter how much you love them, no matter what you'd give up. Then what's the point? Olivia's voice was ragged. What's the point of any of this? The company, the success, She gestured at the expensive apartment around them. All of it's meaningless without her. Daniel didn't have an answer for that. He'd asked himself the same question too many times to count. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then, because he'd already crossed every professional boundary that existed, Daniel said, I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 6. Olivia's expression shifted, something flickering in her eyes. Every morning she asks me if today is the day Mommy comes back, and every morning I have to tell her no. He swallowed hard, but she still gets up, still goes to school, still draws pictures and tells me about her day and laughs at stupid jokes, and I don't know how she does it, but she does, so I figure I owe it to her to try to do the same. Try to what? To live, even when it feels impossible. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her processing his words, turning them over, looking for the catch. She was used to people wanting something from her, he realized, used to every interaction being transactional. You should go, she said finally, but her voice was softer now. Less of a dismissal, more of a surrender. Daniel nodded. He picked up his toolbox, headed toward the door. But he paused at the threshold, looking back. Olivia was standing beside the cake again, one hand hovering over the unlit candle. For what it's worth, he said, I think Emma would want you to light it. He left before she could respond, taking the service elevator down while his heart hammered in his chest. What the hell had he just done? He'd overstepped in every possible way, violated her privacy, said things that were none of his business to say. He'd probably be fired by morning. But when he got home and checked on Sophie, watching her sleep with the same peaceful expression his wife used to have, he didn't regret it. Because for the first time in 2 years, he'd met someone else who understood. Someone else who knew what it meant to smile during the day while drowning at night. Someone else who was still trying to figure out how to live in a world that felt permanently broken. But the next few weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Daniel took Sophie to school, fixed leaky faucets and electrical issues and stuck elevators, picked Sophie up, made dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and tried not to think too hard about the empty side of the bed. Mrs. Chen watched Sophie when his shifts ran late, and he pretended not to notice the way she looked at him with pity that made his skin itch. He didn't see Olivia Grant again. No more emergency calls to the penthouse. He told himself that was good, better. What happened that night had been an anomaly, a moment of weakness for both of them. She'd probably regretted it the moment he left. But Sophie had other ideas. It started with the drawings. Sophie had always loved to draw, spent hours at the kitchen table with her crayons, creating elaborate scenes that she narrated in complete detail. But lately, her drawings had taken on a specific theme. Rainbows. Rainbows everywhere. Rainbows over houses. Rainbows with people standing underneath. Rainbows with stars and hearts and flowers. When Daniel asked why rainbows, Sophie had looked at him with the serious expression she got when talking about big important things. Because they come after the rain, Daddy. They mean things get better. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to tell his 6-year-old daughter that sometimes things didn't get better. They just got different. One Tuesday evening, Sophie presented him with her latest masterpiece. A rainbow arcing over 2 stick figures, one big, one small, with the words, "You are not alone," written in crooked letters across the top. It's for the sad lady, Sophie announced. Daniel looked up from the dishes he'd been washing. What sad lady? The one in the big building where you work, the one who's sad like you sometimes. His heart stopped. Sophie, I never told you about... Mrs. Chen said you help a very important lady who lives at the very top, like in a fairy tale. Sophie tilted her head, considering. But fairy tales are supposed to be happy. Is she happy? Daniel dried his hands slowly, buying time. How did you explain adult grief to a child? How did you protect them from knowing too much while also being honest? No, he said finally. She's not happy. She lost someone very important to her. Like we lost Mommy? The words hit him in the chest like they always did. Yeah, sweetie. Like that. Sophie studied her drawing, then looked up at him with those eyes that were too knowing for 6 years old. Then she needs this. So she knows. Knows what? That she's not alone. That's what you tell me when I'm sad. That I'm not alone because I have you. She held out the drawing. Give it to her, Daddy. Ashram or... Daniel took the paper, looking at the crooked letters and bright crayons and stick figures that somehow managed to convey more hope than he'd felt in years. He should have said no. Should have explained that you can't just give drawings to important executives. That Olivia Grant had probably forgotten about their encounter entirely. That some grief was too private to intrude on twice. But he looked at his daughter's face, so full of certainty that this simple gesture mattered, and he couldn't bring himself to disappoint her. Okay, he said. I'll give it to her. Sophie beamed. Tell her it's from Sophie, and tell her rainbows always come back. It took Daniel 3 days to work up the courage. 3 days of carrying the drawing in his toolbox, pulling it out during breaks, talking himself in and out of delivering it. It was stupid, presumptuous. Olivia Grant didn't need a crayon drawing from a 6-year-old. She needed privacy and space, and for people to stop reminding her of what she'd lost. But Sophie asked about it every night. Did you give the sad lady my picture yet, Daddy? And every night he had to say no, watching her face fall a little more. So on Friday evening, after his shift ended, and most of the building's residents had left for weekend homes in the Hamptons or wherever rich people went, Daniel found himself standing outside the penthouse again. He knocked, waited. Nothing. He tried the handle, locked this time. Relief flooded through him, mixed with something that might have been disappointment. He'd tried. He could tell Sophie he'd tried, that was enough. He was turning to leave when the door opened. Olivia stood there in jeans and a sweater, looking more human than he'd ever seen her. Her hair was in a ponytail, no makeup, bare feet. For a moment they just stared at each other. Daniel held up the drawing like an offering. My daughter made this. For you. I told her I'd deliver it, and she's 6, so she's relentless about these things. And I know it's probably weird, but... Olivia took the paper, her fingers brushing his briefly. She looked down at the rainbow, the stick figures, the words written in purple crayon. You are not alone. Her throat worked. When she looked up, her eyes were bright. Sophie, she said, that's your daughter's name. Yeah, she wanted you to know that rainbows always come back. Daniel felt like an idiot saying it out loud. I know it's just a kid thing, but she insisted, and come in, Olivia interrupted. What? Come in, please. She stepped back, holding the door open. Daniel hesitated. Every professional instinct he had was screaming at him to decline politely and leave. But something in Olivia's expression stopped him. A vulnerability he recognized, a loneliness that mirrored his own. He went in. The penthouse looked different than it had that night, lived in somehow. There were papers scattered on the coffee table, a blanket thrown over the couch, a mug sitting on the kitchen counter, small signs of actual habitation. Olivia led him to the living room, gesturing for him to sit. He perched on the edge of an expensive-looking chair while she studied the drawing. I've been thinking about what you said, she said finally, about living even when it feels impossible. Daniel waited. I've spent 2 years trying to be someone I'm not, someone who has it all together, who doesn't break, who can run a company and smile during meetings and pretend that I'm fine. She traced one finger over the rainbow Sophie had drawn. But I'm not fine. I haven't been fine for a very long time. Nobody expects you to be fine. Bossy. Everyone expects me to be fine. My board, my investors, my employees. They need me to be the strong one. the capable one, the one who doesn't let personal tragedy interfere with business. She looked at him. You were the first person in 2 years who didn't expect me to be anything other than broken. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Daniel didn't know what to. I fired my therapist last month, Olivia continued. She kept telling me I needed to process my grief and move through the stages and find closure. As if grief is something you can schedule, as if there's an end point where you wake up one day and everything's okay again. People don't know what else to say. I know, and I know they mean well, but sometimes, she set the drawing down carefully on the coffee table. Sometimes I just want someone to acknowledge that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to still be drowning 2 years later. It is okay, Daniel said quietly. There's no timeline for this, no right way to do it. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city glittered with 1,000 lights, indifferent to their pain. Tell me about Emma, Daniel said. He didn't know why he said it, maybe because nobody ever asked him about his wife anymore, and he knew how much that silence hurt. Olivia's expression shifted. Surprise, then something softer. She loved purple, Olivia said. Everything had to be purple. Purple clothes, purple toys, purple food if we could manage it. A small smile touched her lips. She used to tell me she was going to paint our whole house purple when she grew up. Every room, even the ceilings. Sounds like she had strong opinions. She did. She was so much stronger than I ever was. Even when she was sick. Even when the treatments made her so weak she could barely lift her head. Olivia's voice cracked. She never complained. She used to comfort me. Can you imagine? A 5-year-old comforting her mother, telling me it was going to be okay. Daniel's chest ached. Sophie does that too. When she catches me crying, she pats my head and says, "It's okay, Daddy. Mommy would want you to be happy." How do they know that? How do they understand things we can't? I don't know. I think maybe they see things more clearly than we do, without all the complicated parts we add on top. Olivia wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't remember the last time I talked about her, about Emma. Everyone tiptoes around it. They mention my loss in vague terms, but never say her name, as if saying it will break me more than I'm already broken. Say it now, Daniel said, as much as you want. So she did. She told him about Emma's laugh, which had sounded like bells, about how she'd insisted on wearing her tutu to the grocery store every single time, even in winter, about the way she'd narrated everything she was doing in complete detail, providing running commentary on her day like she was hosting her own personal TV show. She told him about the hospital visits, the treatments, the hope that kept getting smaller while the medical bills got bigger. The night the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. She told him about the last conversation. Emma, weak and pale, asking her mother to promise she'd be happy someday. Olivia, lying through her tears, promising something she had no idea how to deliver. And Daniel listened. He listened the way he wished someone had listened to him 2 years ago, without trying to fix it, without offering platitudes, just listening. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from the weight of memory, he told her about his wife, about Rachel, about how she'd been terrible at cooking but insisted on trying anyway, producing disasters that they'd laugh about while ordering pizza, about how she'd sung off key in the shower every morning, driving him crazy in the best way, about how she'd wanted 3 more kids, a dog, a house with a yard, about how he'd been running late that day, about the phone call, about arriving at the hospital to find Sophie already orphaned and terrified, about the guilt that still woke him up at 3 a.m. They talked until the city outside grew quiet, until the sky began to lighten at the edges. 2 people who'd been drowning alone, finally able to breathe in the presence of someone who understood. When Daniel finally left, the drawing remained on Olivia's coffee table, a reminder, in bright crayons and crooked letters, that neither of them was alone anymore. The thing about grief, Daniel had learned, was that it didn't follow rules. It didn't care about your schedule or your responsibilities or the fact that you had a 6-year-old who needed breakfast and clean clothes and someone to remember to sign her permission slips. It showed up whenever it wanted, grabbed you by the throat, and didn't let go until it was done with you. What he hadn't expected was that sharing it might make it lighter. He started seeing Olivia in ways that felt accidental, but probably weren't. She'd be in the building lobby when he arrived for his shift, pretending to check her mail. He'd run into her in the parking garage when he was leaving, both of them offering awkward hellos that lingered a beat too long. Once, she was waiting by the service elevator with 2 cups of coffee, claiming she'd ordered too many by mistake. They didn't talk about what had happened that night in her penthouse. Didn't acknowledge the hours spent trading stories about the people they'd lost. It was easier to pretend those conversations existed in some separate space, disconnected from their normal lives. But the coffee became a regular thing. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Olivia would be in the lobby with 2 cups, and they'd ride the elevator together in comfortable silence. She never asked him to sit down or come up to her apartment again. He never suggested it. The boundaries felt important, even if neither of them could articulate why. Sophie noticed, of course. Kids noticed everything. "Is the sad lady less sad now?" she asked one morning while Daniel was braiding her hair, a skill he'd taught himself through YouTube videos in sheer desperation. "I think maybe a little bit," Daniel said, trying to keep the braid even. "Your drawing helped." "Good." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then, "Does she have any kids?" Daniel's hands stilled. He'd been dreading this question, knowing it would come eventually, but hoping maybe it wouldn't. "She had a daughter," he said carefully. "But she's not here anymore." "Like Mommy?" "Yeah, baby. Like Mommy." Sophie processed this with the seriousness she applied to all big important information. Then she's extra sad, because mommies are supposed to take care of their kids forever. "They try to," Daniel said, his throat tight. "But sometimes things happen that nobody can control." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." Sophie twisted around to look at him, her half-finished braid coming loose. "Can I meet her?" "Who?" "The sad lady. I want to tell her about the rainbows in person." Every protective instinct Daniel had screamed no. He didn't want Sophie anywhere near his complicated whatever this was with Olivia. Didn't want his daughter exposed to that kind of raw grief. She'd seen enough of his own. But Sophie was looking at him with those eyes that were too much like Rachel's, full of certainty that kindness mattered even when everything else was falling apart. "I'll ask her," he heard himself say. "But only if she says yes. Deal?" "Deal." He brought it up on Thursday while they were riding the elevator with their coffee. Olivia was dressed for a board meeting, sharp suit, hair pulled back, the armor she wore to face the world, but she took the coffee like it was a lifeline. "Sophie wants to meet you at," Daniel said, watching the floor numbers climb. Olivia's hand tightened on her cup. "Why?" "Because she's 6 and she doesn't understand that some things are complicated. She just knows you're sad, and she thinks meeting her will help." "I don't—" Olivia stopped, started again. "I don't know if I can do that." "I know. That's why I'm asking first instead of just showing up with her." They reached Daniel's floor. He stepped out but held the door. "You don't have to," he said. "I can tell her you're busy. She'll understand." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to say yes battling the part that was terrified of what it might cost. "Saturday," she said finally. "If you want, I could come down. To the park, maybe. Nothing formal." "You sure?" "No, but I'm saying yes anyway." The elevator doors started to close. Daniel caught them. 2 o'clock, he said. "The playground on 5th. Sophie will be the one in the purple jacket." Olivia smiled, small and sad. Emma loved purple too. "I know." Saturday came with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Daniel think of apple cider and Rachel's laugh, and the future they'd planned that would never happen. He dressed Sophie in her favorite purple jacket, the one with the stars on the sleeves, and tried not to let his nervousness show. "Is she coming?" Sophie asked for the 5th time, bouncing on her toes while they waited by the swings. "She said she would." "But what if she's too sad to leave her house?" "Then we'll try another day." But Olivia showed up. She appeared at the edge of the playground at exactly 2 o'clock, wearing jeans and a sweater and looking like she might bolt at any second. Daniel raised a hand in greeting. She walked over slowly, like approaching something fragile. Sophie didn't wait. She ran straight to Olivia and stopped just in front of her, tilting her head back to look up. "Hi," Sophie said. "I'm Sophie. I made you the rainbow picture." Olivia crouched down to Sophie's eye level. "I know, I have it on my refrigerator now. It's the best thing in my whole apartment." "Really?" "Really." Sophie beamed. Do you want to swing with me? My daddy pushes too high sometimes, but I can show you the right way. Olivia glanced at Daniel, something uncertain in her expression. He shrugged, trying to convey that this was entirely up to her, that there was no pressure, that she could leave right now if she wanted. She stayed. Daniel watched them from a bench while Sophie chattered non-stop, explaining the complex social dynamics of first grade and the intricacies of the playground hierarchy and why the slide was better than the monkey bars, but only on Tuesdays. Olivia listened with the kind of attention Daniel recognized, the attention of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be around a child's unselfconscious joy. After 20 minutes, Sophie dragged Olivia over to where Daniel sat. Daddy, Miss Olivia doesn't know how to play hopscotch. Can you believe that? Tragic, Daniel said seriously. I had a deprived childhood, Olivia added, her tone matching his. Sophie gasped. We have to teach her right now. For the next hour, Daniel and Olivia found themselves receiving detailed instructions on the proper execution of hopscotch, tag, and something Sophie called lava monster that seemed to have rules she made up as she went along. Olivia played along with a hesitance that gradually melted into something that almost looked like ease. At one point, while Sophie was occupied with collecting the perfect stick for reasons only she understood, Olivia sat down next to Daniel on the bench. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For this. For not treating me like I'm made of glass. For letting me... She trailed off, watching Sophie. Emma would have been 7 now. Would have been in 2nd grade, would have been bossing me around just like this. Daniel didn't say anything, just sat with her while they watched his daughter play, both of them thinking about the children who should have been there too. She talks about her mom sometimes, Daniel said after a while. Sophie. She'll just bring her up out of nowhere like she's part of a normal conversation. Mommy likes strawberries, or Mommy used to sing this song. It used to tear me apart every time. Used to? Still does sometimes, but it's different now. Like maybe keeping her memory alive is more important than protecting myself from the pain. Olivia was quiet for a moment. I don't talk about Emma. To anyone. My therapist said I was avoiding, that I needed to engage with my grief. She made air quotes around the phrase. So I fired her. Sounds reasonable. That startled a laugh out of her. My board thinks I'm unhinged, taking meetings from home, skipping social events. They're too polite to say it directly, but I can see it in their faces. Are you? Unhinged? Probably. She looked at him. Does that scare you? No, I think maybe we're all a little unhinged. The people who aren't are the ones I don't trust. Sophie ran back over, breathless and clutching her perfect stick. Miss Olivia, do you have a favorite color? Purple, Olivia said without hesitation. Sophie's face lit up like Christmas. Me too, we match. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, a crack in the careful control she maintained. Daniel saw her throat work, saw her blink rapidly, saw her smile even as her eyes went bright. Yeah, she said, her voice rough. We match. They stayed at the playground until Sophie's energy finally flagged and she declared she was hungry enough to eat a whole pizza by herself. Daniel suggested dinner at the cheap Italian place down the street, expecting Olivia to politely decline. She didn't. The restaurant was nothing fancy. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, breadsticks that came in unlimited baskets. Sophie insisted Olivia sit next to her in the booth and proceeded to narrate every topping choice on her pizza in excruciating detail. So then you have to decide if you want mushrooms because mushrooms are good, but some people think they're squishy. And I used to think they were squishy, but now I think they're okay, but only if. They're not too big because big mushrooms are definitely squishy. Don't you think? Definitely, Olivia agreed, completely serious. Daniel watched them, something warm and terrifying unfurling in his chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. He thought maybe he and Olivia could be friends who understood each other's grief, people who checked in occasionally, who knew when to leave each other alone. He hadn't planned on his daughter falling in love with her on sight, hadn't planned on the way Olivia softened around Sophie, the armor cracking to reveal someone younger and more vulnerable underneath. Hadn't planned on wanting this to be more than accidental. Your daughter is amazing, Olivia said later, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the booth, her head on Daniel's lap. You're doing an incredible job with her. I'm doing my best. That's all I can manage most days. It's more than enough. She's happy. adjusted. She talks about her mother without fear. Olivia looked down at her hands. I couldn't do that. After Emma died, I threw myself into work. 16-hour days, sleeping at the office. Anything to avoid the empty apartment and the memories and the guilt. Guilt? For not being able to save her. For sometimes being relieved when it was over because at least she wasn't suffering anymore. For being angry that she left me. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. For still being alive when she's not. Daniel understood that guilt intimately. You know that's not rational, right? I know, doesn't make it go away. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence for a while, Sophie's quiet breathing the only sound between them. Finally, Daniel said, You should come to dinner again, next Saturday, if you want. Olivia looked startled. Why? Because Sophie will ask about you all week if you don't. And because... He hesitated, then pushed forward. Because I think maybe we're good for each other, all three of us. I don't know if I know how to do this. Do what? Be around people. Be around a child without falling apart. You didn't fall apart today. Not on the outside. Daniel shifted carefully, trying not to wake Sophie. Here's what I think. I think falling apart is fine. I think pretending you're okay when you're not is what actually breaks you. And I think maybe having people around who understand that is the only thing that makes any of this bearable. Olivia studied him for a long moment. You're very wise for a maintenance guy. I'm not wise. I'm just tired of drowning alone. Yeah, she said softly. Me too. The next Saturday, Olivia showed up at the park again, and the Saturday after that. It became routine without them discussing it. Weekends at the playground, dinner at the Italian place, Sophie chattering between them like a bridge connecting two islands. But routines, Daniel knew, had a way of making you forget that nothing was permanent. The first crack came on a Thursday morning. Daniel was heading into work when he saw Olivia in the lobby, but she wasn't waiting with coffee. She was standing near the elevators, perfectly still, staring at her phone with an expression he couldn't read. Everything okay? He asked. She looked up, and he saw something in her eyes that made his stomach drop. Fear, maybe? Or anger, or both. My ex-husband is in town, she said flatly. Daniel knew almost nothing about Olivia's ex except that he existed and that the marriage had ended before Emma got sick. She never talked about him, and Daniel had learned not to push. And that's bad because Marcus doesn't do anything without a reason. And the last time he was in town, he tried to convince my board I was mentally unfit to run the company. Jesus, can he do that? He can try. He has friends on the board, people who already think I'm unstable because I won't pretend Emma never existed. She shoved her phone in her pocket. I should have seen this coming. He's been quiet for too long. What are you going to do? No, what I always do. Prove him wrong. Show up. Be perfect. Make sure nobody has any ammunition to use against me. She looked at him, and her expression was carefully blank. She looked at him, and her. I might need to cancel Saturday, and maybe the week after, until this blows over. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. Okay. It's not... She stopped, started again. This isn't about you, or Sophie. This is about protecting everything I've built. The company is all I have left. I can't lose it too. Yes. I get it. Do you? There was an edge to her voice now, sharp and defensive. Because from where I'm standing, you have a job and a daughter and a life that doesn't depend on a room full of board members deciding whether you're competent enough to keep what's yours. The words stung more than they should have. Daniel kept his face neutral. You're right. I don't get it, but I'm not the enemy here. I know, I'm sorry. She closed her eyes. I can't fall apart right now. I can't afford to. Then don't. Do what you need to do. She looked at him for a long moment, something like regret flickering across her face. Then she turned and walked toward the main elevator, leaving Daniel standing in the lobby with 2 cups of coffee and the sinking feeling that everything was about to get a lot more complicated. Sophie took the news about canceled Saturdays exactly as well as Daniel expected. But why? She demanded, her lower lip trembling. Did I do something wrong? No, baby. Miss Olivia just has some grown-up stuff to deal with at work. But she'll come back, right? After the grown-up stuff is done? Daniel wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise that Olivia would be back. That this was temporary. that the small routine they'd built wouldn't crumble. But he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. I hope so, he said instead. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Daniel saw Olivia exactly once, crossing the lobby in a tailored suit with 2 men in expensive coats flanking her like bodyguards. She looked right through him, her face a mask of professional courtesy, and he understood. She was in survival mode. He'd been there himself, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. The worst part was watching Sophie slowly stop asking. Stop drawing rainbows. Stop bringing up Miss Olivia in conversation. She didn't throw tantrums or demand explanations. She just quietly put away that hope, the way kids learn to do when the world disappointed them enough times. Daniel hated it. Hated that he'd let this happen. He should have kept better boundaries. Should have protected Sophie from getting attached to someone whose life was too complicated, too precarious, to make room for them. Should have protected himself from the same thing. He was fixing a radiator on the 15th floor when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Brooks? Daniel? It's Olivia. His heart kicked. Hey, everything okay? Can you meet me tonight? I know it's last minute and you probably have plans with Sophie, but I need to talk to someone who isn't trying to manage me or manipulate me or... Her voice cracked. Please. He should have said no. Should have told her he couldn't drop everything just because she'd decided she needed him after 3 weeks of silence. What time? He said instead. 8? There's a coffee shop on Madison, the one that's open late. I'll be there. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Sophie with minimal questions, though her knowing look said plenty. Daniel showed up at the coffee shop at 7:55, ordering something he didn't want just to have something to do with his hands. Olivia arrived at exactly 8, looking nothing like the polished executive he'd seen in the lobby. She was wearing jeans and an old sweater, no makeup, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked exhausted and young and scared. She slid into the seat across from him without ordering anything. Marcus is trying to take the company, she said without preamble. He's been talking to board members, building a case that I'm emotionally compromised, unfit to lead. Based on what? Based on the fact that I work from home sometimes, that I've turned down social events, that I had a public breakdown at a charity gala 6 months ago when someone mentioned their daughter's piano recital and I had to leave early. She laughed, bitter. Based on the fact that I'm still grieving my daughter 2 years later like that makes me weak. That's insane. That's business. Grief makes people uncomfortable. It reminds them that bad things happen, that money and power can't protect you from everything. They want the version of me that existed before Emma died, the one who didn't have cracks. Daniel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You're not weak for grieving. You're human. Humans don't run billion-dollar companies. Machines do. That's what they want. A machine that looks like me but doesn't feel anything. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want anymore. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. 3 weeks ago, I would have said I wanted the company more than anything. That it was the only thing I had left of the life I built before everything fell apart. But now... She trailed off. Now? Now I think maybe I've been using work the same way I used to use alcohol. As a way to avoid feeling anything real. As a way to pretend I'm fine when I'm not. Daniel squeezed her hand. What changed? You did. You and Sophie. You made me remember what it felt like to be around people who didn't need me to be perfect. Who saw me fall apart and didn't run away. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. And then I pushed you away anyway because I was scared. Scared of what? Of losing something else I care about. Of letting you in and then having to watch it all disappear. Of being happy again when I don't deserve to be. There it was. The guilt that lived in both of them. The voice that said happiness was a betrayal of the people they'd lost. Emma wouldn't want you to be miserable, Daniel said quietly. I'm guessing she'd want you to live, to be happy, to have people around who care about you. How do you know? Because Sophie tells me that about her mom. Every time she catches me drowning, Mommy would want you to be happy, Daddy. And she's right. Rachel would hate seeing me like this, would hate that I've spent 3 years just surviving instead of living. Olivia wiped at her eyes with her free hand. I miss her so much. Every single day. It doesn't get easier. People said it would get easier, but they lied. It doesn't get easier. But maybe it gets different. Maybe you learn how to carry it without it crushing you completely. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But maybe we could figure it out together. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. An understanding. A choice to stop drowning alone and start swimming towards something that might be hope. I want Saturday back, she said. I want dinner at that terrible Italian place where Sophie talks nonstop about mushrooms. I want to learn hopscotch and listen to her explain the playground hierarchy. I want... She stopped, swallowed. I want to try being happy, even if it's terrifying. Okay, Daniel said. Then let's be terrified together. They sat in that coffee shop until closing time, holding hands across a table sticky with spilled sugar, two broken people deciding that maybe broken didn't mean finished, that maybe there was still a chance to build something new from the pieces. Saturday came back, and then the Saturday after that. Sophie bloomed under Olivia's attention, and Olivia slowly remembered how to smile without it feeling like a betrayal. They fell into a rhythm that felt less like routine and more like family, messy and imperfect and real. But Marcus wasn't done. Daniel could see it in the tension Olivia carried, the way she checked her phone constantly, the shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday. Daniel was at work when Olivia called, her voice shaking so badly he could barely understand her. He leaked it, she said. Marcus leaked photos of us, at the park, at the restaurant. He's telling the board I'm having an inappropriate relationship with an employee, that I'm using company resources for personal gain, that I'm... She choked on whatever she was going to say next. Daniel's blood went cold. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing anyone can do. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want me to explain myself, to justify my relationship with you like it's some kind of scandal. She laughed, hollow. I'm going to lose everything, the company, my reputation, all of it. Then we'll figure something out. There's no we in this, Daniel. This is my mess, my ex-husband, my company falling apart. Her voice hardened. I need to handle this alone. You don't have to, Yes, I do. I'm sorry. I have to go. She hung up before he could respond. Daniel stood in the empty hallway, phone still pressed to his ear, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under him. 3 weeks ago, he'd thought maybe they had a chance, that maybe grief didn't have to mean isolation, that maybe broken people could find something whole in each other. He'd been wrong. That night, Sophie asked where Miss Olivia was. Daniel told her the truth in the simplest terms he could manage, that Miss Olivia was dealing with some very hard grown-up problems and might not be able to visit for a while. Sophie, who was 6 and wise beyond her years, just nodded. Is it because of this rainbow? Did it not work? The rainbow worked, Daniel said, pulling her close. Sometimes grown-up problems are just too big for rainbows to fix. That's dumb. Rainbows should fix everything. Yeah, baby, they should. But as Daniel held his daughter while she cried quiet tears for a woman she barely knew but had learned to love anyway, he wondered if maybe Sophie was right. Maybe rainbows could fix things. Maybe hope wasn't stupid. Maybe Olivia just needed to be reminded that she wasn't alone, even when she was trying very hard to convince herself that she was. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m., which gave Olivia exactly 48 hours to prepare a defense for something that shouldn't need defending. She spent Tuesday night in her office, surrounded by financial reports and performance metrics, and every piece of evidence she could gather that proved her competence as CEO had nothing to do with her personal life. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough. Because Marcus wasn't attacking her numbers. He was attacking her character, and you couldn't defend character with spreadsheets. Her phone buzzed around midnight, Daniel's name on the screen. She stared at it for 3 rings before declining the call. Then she turned her phone off entirely and went back to work. By Wednesday morning, she'd slept maybe 2 hours. Her assistant brought coffee and looked at her with the kind of concern that made Olivia want to scream. Everyone was looking at her like that now, the receptionist, the junior executives, even the cleaning staff, like she was fragile, like she might shatter at any moment. Maybe she would. Ms. Grant? Her assistant, Jennifer, hovered in the doorway. There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Tell them I'm busy. I tried. He's very persistent. Says his name is Daniel Brooks. Olivia's head snapped up. What? Should I send him away? She should say yes, should maintain the boundaries she'd tried to rebuild. But her mouth said, "Give me 5 minutes, then send him in." She used those 5 minutes to try to make herself look less like someone who'd been awake for 30 hours straight. It didn't work. When Daniel walked through her office door, she saw his expression shift from determination to concern. "You look terrible," he said. "Good morning to you, too." "I'm serious, Olivia. When's the last time you ate?" She couldn't remember. "I'm fine." "I ain't." "You're not fine. You're running on fumes and stubbornness." He set a brown paper bag on her desk. "Mrs. Chen made you soup. She said you look like you need someone to feed you." "You told your neighbor about this?" Sophie told Mrs. Chen that Miss Olivia was sad again, and Mrs. Chen decided that required soup. "I'm just the delivery system." He sat down in the chair across from her desk without being invited. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. The board meets tomorrow. Marcus has spent weeks poisoning them against me. I'll present my case, and they'll make their decision, and that's it." "What's your case?" "That I'm still the best person to run this company. That my personal life has no bearing on my professional performance. That the photos Marcus leaked prove nothing except that I have friends." "Friends," Daniel repeated. "Is that what we are?" Olivia felt something crack inside her chest. "I don't know what we are. I don't have the bandwidth to figure it out right now." "Okay, then let me make it simple." Daniel leaned forward. "I'm the guy who shows up with soup when you forget to eat. I'm the guy who lets you cry on his shoulder at midnight. I'm the guy who thinks you're brilliant and strong and doing the best you can with an impossible situation. And I'm the guy who's going to sit in that board meeting tomorrow and tell them exactly that if you'll let me." "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because you'll make it worse. They'll see it as proof that you're clouding my judgment, that I'm letting personal relationships interfere with business decisions." "Are you?" "No, but that doesn't matter. Perception is reality in their world." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did Emma want for you?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "Emma, before she died. What did she want for you?" Olivia's hands started shaking. "That's not fair." I know, but I'm asking anyway." She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in that hospital room, holding her daughter's too small hand, listening to words that would haunt her forever. "She wanted me to be happy," Olivia whispered. "She made me promise I'd find a way to be happy again." "And are you? Happy?" "I don't—" Her voice broke. "I don't know how to be happy when everything's falling apart. You were happy on Saturday, at the park with Sophie. I saw it. That was different." "How?" "Because I wasn't thinking about the company or the board or Marcus or any of this. I was just present, in the moment, with people who didn't expect anything from me except to show up." Daniel stood up, walked around the desk, and pulled her to her feet. She was so surprised she didn't resist. "Listen to me," he said, his hands on her shoulders. "You've spent 2 years trying to be perfect, trying to prove you're strong enough to handle everything alone. But Emma didn't ask you to be perfect. She asked you to be happy. And you can't do that if you keep pushing away everyone who cares about you. I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting you. If you're at that meeting tomorrow, they'll use it against both of us. They'll say I'm exploiting an employee. They'll let them say whatever they want. I don't care." "Well, I care. I care that Sophie might lose her only source of income because her father decided to defend a woman who—" She stopped herself. "Who what? Who isn't worth it?" Daniel's expression shifted to something that looked like anger. "Don't do that. Don't decide what I think you're worth. You don't understand what you're risking. I understand perfectly. I'm risking a job I can replace. You're risking a company you built from nothing. So maybe you should ask yourself why you're so scared of letting me stand next to you." "Because everyone I love leaves," Olivia wanted to scream. "Because I can't survive losing someone else. Because it's easier to push you away now than to watch you disappear later. But what came out was, I can't let you throw away your stability for me. That's not your decision to make." "Yes, it is. You work for this building. I'm a tenant. If the board sees you defending me, they'll assume I coerced you somehow. They'll fire you just to prove a point. Then I'll find another job." "Daniel, stop." He said it gently but firmly. Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I'm a grown man. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to sacrifice your daughter's security for someone you barely know. That landed. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands dropped from her shoulders. You're right, he said quietly. I barely know you. I don't know your favorite food or what you studied in college or how you built this company. But I know what you sound like when you cry. I know you still buy birthday cakes for a daughter who's been gone for 2 years. I know you look at Sophie like she's precious and heartbreaking at the same time. And I know you're terrified of being happy because you think it means forgetting the people we lost. He stepped back. So yeah, maybe I barely know you, but I know enough. Mom. Olivia felt tears sliding down her face and didn't bother wiping them away. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. I lost everything 3 years ago when Rachel died. What I have now? It's not much, but it's real. And I'm not going to stand by and watch you face this alone just because you're scared. I'm not scared. Liar. Oh. They stared at each other across 3 feet of expensive office carpet. Olivia felt like she was standing on the edge of something. A cliff, maybe. Or a bridge over water too deep to see the bottom. If you come to that meeting, she said finally, they'll destroy you too. Let them try. I mean it, Daniel. Marcus doesn't fight fair. He'll dig into your past. Find every mistake you've ever made. Use Sophie against you if he can. My daughter is off limits. You think he cares about limits? He leaked photos of us at a playground. He's already proven Sophie isn't off limits. Daniel's expression went cold. Daniel's expression went, then I guess he and I need to have a conversation. Don't. Olivia grabbed his arm. Don't do anything stupid. That's exactly what he wants. For you to react, to give him more ammunition. So what am I supposed to do? Just stand here while he tears you apart? You're supposed to trust that I can handle this. I do trust you, but that doesn't mean you have to handle it alone. They stood there, her hand still on his arm, both of them breathing too hard. Finally, Olivia said, the soup's probably cold now. Probably. You should go. I have work to do. Olivia? Please. The word came out broken. Please just go. I can't think straight when you're here. He looked at her for a long moment and she saw the hurt in his eyes, but he nodded. Okay, but I'm coming to that meeting tomorrow whether you want me there or not. Daniel, not your decision, he said again. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in her office with cold soup and the taste of her own fear. She didn't sleep that night either, just sat in her penthouse, staring at Sophie's drawing still pinned to her refrigerator. You are not alone, it said in purple crayon. But Olivia had never felt more alone in her life. Thursday morning arrived with gray skies that matched her mood. She dressed in her sharpest suit, the one she wore when she needed armor, applied makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, pulled her hair back so tight it hurt. When she walked into the boardroom at 9:55, Marcus was already there. He looked exactly the same as he had 2 years ago. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He'd always been handsome in a way that made people trust him automatically, which was part of what made him dangerous. Olivia, he said, standing. You look well. She didn't respond, just took her seat at the head of the table and waited for the other board members to file in. They came in clusters. The old guard who'd known her father, the tech investors who'd funded her expansion, the finance people who only cared about quarterly reports. 12 faces, some sympathetic, some neutral, some already decided against her. At exactly 10 a.m., the chairman called the meeting to order. We're here to address concerns raised about Ms. Grant's fitness to continue as CEO, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Mr. Winters has provided documentation suggesting that personal issues may be affecting her professional judgment. Ms. Grant, you'll have an opportunity to respond. Marcus stood, impossibly calm. I want to be clear that I take no pleasure in this. Olivia is a brilliant businesswoman, but brilliance isn't enough when that brilliance is compromised by instability. He pulled up a presentation on the screen. Photos of Olivia at the park with Daniel and Sophie. Screenshots of her calendar showing canceled meetings and working from home days. A timeline of what he called erratic behavior over the past 6 months. 2 years ago, Olivia suffered a terrible tragedy, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. The loss of our daughter nearly destroyed her. I understood that. I gave her space to grieve, but grief has turned into something else, something that's affecting her ability to lead. He clicked to another slide. More photos. Olivia and Daniel at the coffee shop, holding hands across the table. Olivia leaving the building late at night looking disheveled. The narrative Marcus was building was clear. Unstable woman using her position to pursue inappropriate relationships while the company suffered. The numbers don't lie, Marcus continued. Stock prices are down 8%. 3 major clients have expressed concerns about leadership continuity. Employee satisfaction surveys show uncertainty about the company's direction. He paused for effect. And then there's the matter of Ms. Grant's relationship with a building maintenance worker. An employee, technically, which raises serious questions about the use of company resources and potential conflicts of interest. Olivia felt her nails digging into her palms. Every word was carefully crafted to sound reasonable while painting her as unfit, and the worst part was that some of it was true. She had canceled meetings, she had worked from home, she had struggled, but she'd also kept the company profitable, had launched 2 new products, had increased revenue by 15% year over year. When Marcus finally sat down, the chairman turned to her. "Ms. Grant, your response?" She stood, her notes forgotten, because she realized suddenly that Marcus was right about one thing. Numbers didn't lie. But they didn't tell the whole truth either. "Everything Marcus said is factually accurate," she began. "I have canceled meetings. I have worked from home. I have struggled with grief over the past 2 years. But what he's not telling you is why." She clicked to her own presentation, not photos or timelines, but results. "This company's revenue is up 15%. Our product launches have exceeded projections by an average of 23%. Employee retention is at an all-time high. Customer satisfaction scores are higher than they've ever been. Those are facts, too." She moved to the next slide. "Marcus wants you to believe that grief makes me weak, that my relationship with Daniel Brooks, yes, we're friends, and yes, he works in this building, somehow compromises my judgment, but he's not asking the right question, which is," one of the board members asked, "which is whether a CEO who's human is actually more effective than one who pretends to be a machine." She looked directly at Marcus. "You want to know why employee satisfaction is up? Because I stopped pretending I was fine. I stopped hiding in my office and actually talked to people. I listened. I made decisions based on empathy instead of just algorithms." "Empathy doesn't pay shareholders," Marcus said smoothly. "Doesn't it? Because last I checked, our stock price might be down 8%, which, by the way, reflects market conditions, not company performance. But our long-term projections are stronger than ever. Companies that prioritize employee well-being and authentic leadership consistently outperform those that don't." She was warming up now, the words coming faster. "You want to paint my friendship with Daniel as inappropriate. But here's what it actually is. 2 people who understand loss supporting each other. That's it. There's no financial impropriety, no abuse of power, just basic human connection." "Human connection with a subordinate," Marcus interjected. "The optics alone, the optics are that I'm a woman who dared to have feelings and a personal life while running a company. If I were a man, we wouldn't be having this conversation." One of the female board members nodded slightly. Olivia pressed on. "I'm not going to apologize for grieving my daughter. I'm not going to apologize for working from home occasionally, or for having friends, or for being a whole person instead of just a title. What I will do is continue to deliver results, continue to lead this company with both competence and humanity. And if that's not enough for you, if you need a CEO who's willing to sacrifice every piece of herself for the job, then maybe I'm not the right fit." The room went silent. Olivia sat down, her heart hammering. She'd just given them an out, a way to remove her without it looking like they'd caved to Marcus's manipulation. The chairman cleared his throat. "We'll need time to deliberate. Ms. Grant, Mr. Winters, please wait outside." Olivia gathered her materials with shaking hands and walked out. Marcus followed, that smile still fixed in place. "That was quite a speech," he said once they were alone in the hallway. "Go to hell, Marcus. I'm trying to help you. By destroying everything I've built? By forcing you to see that you can't do this anymore. You're not the same person you were before Emma died. You're broken, Olivia. And broken people shouldn't be in charge. She turned on him, months of anger finally spilling over. You don't get to decide that. You gave up the right to have any opinion about my life when you walked away. I walked away because I couldn't watch you drown anymore. You walked away because grief made me inconvenient, because I stopped being the perfect wife who made you look good at parties. Marcus's expression hardened. Marcus's, I walked away because you couldn't let her go. It's been 2 years, Olivia. 2 years of you living in that apartment like a shrine, buying birthday cakes for a dead child, refusing to move on. The slap came before she realized her hand was moving. Marcus's head snapped to the side, shock replacing smugness. Her name was Emma, Olivia said, her voice deadly quiet. And you don't get to tell me how long I'm allowed to love her. The boardroom door opened. The chairman stepped out, his expression unreadable. We'd like to speak with Ms. Grant alone. Marcus straightened his jacket, touched his reddening cheek, and walked away without another word. Olivia followed the chairman back inside on legs that barely supported her. The board members looked at her with a mixture of expressions: sympathy, uncertainty, calculation. Ms. Grant, the chairman began, we appreciate your candor. Your performance metrics are indeed impressive. However, the concerns raised about your emotional state are valid, Olivia interrupted. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm perfectly stable. I'm still grieving. I probably always will be. But that doesn't make me incompetent. No one's suggesting incompetence, one of the investors said, but the optics of your relationship with Mr. Brooks are only problematic if we make them problematic. Daniel works for the building management company, not for us. There's no conflict of interest, no impropriety, just two people who found friendship and shared loss. The chairman studied her. And if we ask you to end that friendship for the sake of company image, Olivia felt the room tilt. This was it. The choice she'd known was coming. Then I tell you that I'm not willing to sacrifice my humanity for a job. Not even this job. Several board members exchanged glances. The chairman sighed. We'll vote on Monday. Until then, we ask that you avoid any public appearances with Mr. Brooks. And we'd like you to consider taking a leave of absence while we deliberate. A leave of absence. Just temporary. To give everyone time to cool down. It was a demotion masquerading as consideration. Olivia knew it. They knew it. But she also knew that fighting it would only make things worse. Fine, she said. I'll take the leave. She left the building in a daze, ignoring the curious stares from employees who'd already heard about the meeting. Her phone buzzed constantly. Jennifer asking if she was okay. Her lawyer wanting to discuss options, messages from board members trying to explain their positions. She ignored all of them. She should have gone home. Should have locked herself in her penthouse and started planning her next move. But her feet carried her to the park instead. The one where she'd spent Saturdays with Daniel and Sophie, where she'd started to remember what it felt like to be alive. Daniel was there, sitting on their bench. Sophie was at school, so he must have come straight from the building after hearing about the meeting. He stood when he saw her. How bad? They're voting on Monday. Until then, I'm on leave. That's bullshit. That's politics. She sat down heavily. I slapped Marcus. Daniel's eyebrows rose. You what? He said I needed to let Emma go. Called her a dead child. So I slapped him. Good. That startled a laugh out of her, sharp and slightly hysterical. It's not good. I assaulted my ex-husband in front of the board. I'm supposed to be proving I'm stable, and I hit someone. He deserved it. That's not the point, isn't it? Daniel sat down beside her. You've spent 2 years being what everyone else needed you to be. Perfect CEO. Grieving mother who knows when to stop grieving. Woman who has it all together. Maybe it's time to stop being what they need and start being what you are. Which is what? Broken? Unstable? A woman who can't let go? Human. Imperfect. Someone who's trying really hard to survive something impossible. Olivia leaned against him, too tired to maintain any more walls. I think I'm going to lose the company. Maybe. You're supposed to tell me it'll be okay. I'm not going to lie to you. It might not be okay. They might vote you out. Marcus might win. Your life might fall apart. That's a terrible pep talk. I'm not done. He put his arm around her. Even if all of that happens, you'll still be here. You'll still be breathing. You'll still have the chance to build something new. It won't be the same, but it might be good anyway. How do you know? Because 3 years ago, I lost my wife and thought my life was over. And it was, in a way. The life I'd planned ended. But this life, the one with Sophie and early mornings and terrible pay and you, this one's good too. Different, but good. Olivia closed her eyes. I'm scared. I know. What if they vote me out and I lose everything and it turns out I'm nothing without the company? Then you'll figure out who you are without it, and I'll be here while you do. Why? She pulled back to look at him. Why are you still here? I've done nothing but push you away and drag you into my mess. Because Sophie drew you a rainbow and you put it on your refrigerator? Because you showed up to the park even when you were terrified? Because you're trying so hard to be strong that you forgot it's okay to fall apart sometimes? He touched her face gently. Because I see you, Olivia, not the CEO, not the board's version or Marcus's version or whoever else thinks they know who you should be, just you, and I like what I see. She kissed him then, right there on the park bench in the middle of the day. It wasn't planned or smooth or perfect. It was desperate and messy and tasted like tears and hope in equal measure. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. That's going to make the optics worse, he said. I don't care anymore. Good. They sat there together while the afternoon faded to evening, two broken people who'd decided that being broken together was better than being whole alone. Olivia's phone kept buzzing with messages she didn't answer. The board would vote on Monday. Marcus would probably win. Her carefully constructed life would fall apart. But right now, sitting in the October cold with Daniel's arm around her and the memory of Sophie's rainbow in her mind, Olivia thought maybe falling apart wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Maybe it was just making room for something new. The weekend stretched ahead like a minefield. Olivia knew she should be preparing for Monday's vote, calling board members, building alliances, doing damage control. Instead, she spent Friday night at Daniel's apartment, eating pizza on a couch that sagged in the middle, while Sophie explained the intricate plot of her favorite cartoon. And then the princess realizes she doesn't need the prince at all, because she has a dragon who's actually her friend, and they saved the kingdom together, Sophie said, gesturing with a slice of pepperoni. Daddy says it's feminist, but I don't know what that means. It means the princess is smart enough to solve her own problems, Olivia said. Sophie considered this. Are you a princess? Definitely not. But you have problems you need to solve, right? Daddy said you have mean people at work who don't understand. Daniel made a strangled sound. Sophie, we talked about this. You said I could ask questions. I said you could ask appropriate questions. This is appropriate. Miss Olivia needs to know we're on her side. Sophie turned back to Olivia with absolute seriousness. We're on your side, even if the mean people win. Woo? It-shan. Olivia felt her throat go tight. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot. Do you want to color with me? Daddy's bad at staying in the lines, but you might be better. They spent the next hour on the floor with crayons and coloring books that featured more princesses and dragons. Daniel made popcorn that was slightly burnt, and Sophie narrated every color choice in excruciating detail. It was normal and domestic, and so far from Olivia's usual life that she kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a dream. But when Sophie finally crashed around 8, sprawled across the couch with her head in Olivia's lap, it was real. The weight of her, the sound of her breathing, the complete trust in her sleep. I can move her, Daniel said quietly. Don't. She's fine. They sat there in the dim living room, Daniel in the armchair and Olivia on the couch, with a sleeping 6-year-old using her as a pillow. Outside, the city hummed with Friday night energy. Inside, everything was still. I keep thinking about what you said, Olivia murmured. About this life being good, even though it's different from what you planned. And I don't know if I believe it yet, but I want to. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me what you're afraid of. The real fear, not the board vote or Marcus or any of that. Olivia stroked Sophie's hair without thinking about it. I'm afraid that without the company, I'm nothing. that I've spent 2 years using work to avoid dealing with Emma's death. And if they take that away, I'll have to face everything I've been running from. You've already been facing it every Saturday at the park, every time you talk about her instead of pretending she didn't exist. That's different. That's with you, with Sophie. People who understand. So find more people who understand. Build a life that isn't just about work. I don't know how. Neither did I. But Sophie didn't give me a choice. She needed breakfast and clean clothes and someone to show up for school plays. You figure it out because you have to. Olivia looked down at the small face resting against her leg. She's amazing. You know, you're doing an incredible job. I'm doing a terrified job. Every day I wake up convinced I'm going to screw her up permanently. Forget a permission slip or say the wrong thing or let her see me cry one too many times. Do you let her see you cry? Sometimes. She always pats my head and says it's okay to be sad. Like she's the adult and I'm the kid who needs reassurance. Emma did that too. When she was sick, she'd hold my hand and tell me not to worry, that she wasn't scared. Olivia's voice cracked. She was 5 years old and dying, and she was comforting me. Daniel got up and sat beside them on the couch, careful not to disturb Sophie. You know what I think? What? I think they knew something we don't, kids, I mean. They haven't learned yet that they're supposed to hide their feelings or pretend they're fine. They just feel everything and then move on. I wish I could do that. Maybe you can. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting or getting over it, but just feeling it and then getting up the next day anyway. Sophie stirred, mumbling something about dragons in her sleep. Olivia felt a wave of affection so strong it hurt. If the board votes me out, she said quietly, I'll lose my health insurance, my salary, the apartment. So you'll get a different job, a smaller place. You'll figure it out. Just like that? Just like that. It won't be easy, but you'll survive it. How do you know? Because you survived losing Emma. If you can survive that, you can survive anything. They sat in silence for a while, the three of them forming a small island of warmth in the middle of the chaos. Finally, Daniel said, Stay tonight. Take the bed. I'll sleep out here. I can't. You can. You're exhausted. And before you argue, Sophie will be thrilled to find you here in the morning. She'll probably demand pancakes. Fair warning. Olivia wanted to say no, wanted to maintain some boundary between this and whatever her real life was supposed to be. But she was so tired of boundaries, so tired of pretending she didn't need help. Okay, she said. But I'm making the pancakes. Saturday morning arrived with Sophie's face inches from hers, whispering loudly, Daddy, she's still here. I can see that, Soph. Why don't you let her sleep? But it's pancake time. Olivia opened her eyes to find Sophie grinning at her like Christmas had come early. Good morning. You stayed. Daddy said you might leave, but you stayed. Sophie bounced on the bed. Are you going to live here now? Sophie, Daniel said from the doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction. We talked about this. You said to use my inside voice when I asked. I said not to ask at all. Olivia sat up, trying not to laugh at Daniel's expression. It's fine. And no, honey, I'm not moving in. I just stayed one night. Sophie's face fell. Oh, because of the mean people at work? Something like that. Well, that's dumb. You should live here, and then the mean people can't make you sad anymore. If only it were that simple, Olivia thought. But she let Sophie drag her to the kitchen, where Daniel was already pulling out pancake ingredients with the resigned air of someone who knew resistance was futile. The pancakes were a disaster. Olivia had claimed she could cook, but apparently that was optimistic. The first batch burnt. The second batch was somehow raw in the middle. By the third batch, Daniel took over while Olivia and Sophie set the table and argued about whether chocolate chips counted as a breakfast food. They have protein, Sophie insisted. That's not how protein works, Olivia said. Daddy lets me have them on special days. Is today special? Sophie looked at her with complete seriousness. You're here. That makes it special. Olivia's heart cracked a little. She glanced at Daniel, who was very carefully not looking at her while he flipped pancakes. They ate breakfast like a family. Like this was normal. Like Olivia's entire life wasn't hanging by a thread, and Monday wasn't looming like an executioner's blade. Sophie talked non-stop. Daniel interjected occasionally to correct wildly inaccurate versions of events, and Olivia just absorbed it all. This was what she'd been missing. Not just companionship, but belonging. The feeling that she mattered to people in ways that had nothing to do with her job title or bank account. After breakfast, Sophie wanted to go to the park. Daniel tried to suggest a movie instead, clearly worried about photographers or people who might report back to Marcus. But Olivia shook her head. "I'm done hiding," she said. "If they're going to vote me out anyway, I might as well spend my last weekend doing things that make me happy." So they went to the park. And if people stared or took photos, Olivia didn't care. She pushed Sophie on the swings and learned the correct way to navigate the monkey bars and listened to detailed explanations of playground politics that rivaled anything she'd dealt with in the boardroom. "See that girl over there?" Sophie whispered, pointing to a blonde child near the slide. "That's Madison. She says she's the queen of the playground, but nobody voted, so it doesn't count." "Democracy is important," Olivia agreed gravely. "That's what I said. But she said queens don't need votes." I told her that's dictatorship, and my daddy explained that to me. Daniel, overhearing this, looked both proud and slightly concerned. "Maybe we watch too much news in the morning." "There's no such thing as too informed," Olivia said. They stayed until Sophie's energy finally flagged, which took approximately 4 hours. On the walk back, Sophie held both their hands. Swinging between them like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Can Miss Olivia come to my school play?" she asked suddenly. "When's your school play?" Olivia asked. "Tuesday. I'm a tree." "A tree? A very important tree? I have 2 lines." Daniel cleared his throat. "Sophie, Tuesday might not be a good time for Miss Olivia." "Why not?" "Because by Tuesday, Olivia might not have a reason to stay in the city. Might be packing up her life and moving somewhere cheaper, somewhere she could start over without the weight of failure following her." But what she said was, "I'll try my best to be there." Sophie beamed. "You have to sit in the front row. That's where Daddy sits." "I'll save you a seat," Daniel said quietly. That night, after Sophie was in bed and they were sitting on Daniel's sagging couch with cheap wine from the corner store, Olivia asked the question she'd been avoiding. "What happens if they vote me out and I can't afford to stay in the city?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I guess that depends on what you want." "I don't know what I want. 2 months ago, I wanted the company more than anything. Now, I'm not even sure why I was fighting for it. So figure out why. Or figure out what you'd rather fight for instead. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. What matters to you more, the company or this?" He gestured between them. "That's not fair. It's not either or." "Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to lose the company anyway. So the real question is what you do after. Do you go somewhere else and build another empire? Or do you stay here and build something different?" Olivia took a long drink of wine. It was terrible, bitter, and cheap, and she loved it because Daniel had bought it specifically for her. Because he'd remembered she liked red even though they'd only talked about it once. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "if I stay and things don't work out between us, I'll have given up everything for nothing. And if you leave without trying, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what if." "You sound very certain." "I'm not certain about anything, but I know I don't want to wake up in 5 years and realize I let you walk away because I was too scared to ask you to stay." "Is that what you're doing? Asking me to stay?" Daniel set down his wine and turned to face her fully. "Yeah, I am. I'm asking you to stay in this shitty apartment building where the heat doesn't work half the time, and the neighbors are loud, and there's a stain on the ceiling that I'm pretty sure is from a leak 3 floors up. I'm asking you to be a part of this messy, complicated life with a 6-year-old who will ask you impossible questions and a dad who has no idea what he's doing most of the time. I'm asking you to risk everything on the possibility that maybe broken people can build something whole together." Olivia felt tears sliding down her face. "That's a terrible sales pitch." "I know, but it's honest. What if I'm not ready? What if I can't be what you need?" "Then we'll figure it out together. That's the whole point. You don't have to be perfect or ready or have all the answers. You just have to show up. She kissed him then, wine bitter and salt sweet and terrified. He kissed her back like she was something precious, something worth the risk. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia said, "I need to tell you something." "Okay." The last time Emma was conscious, really conscious, she made me promise something. She said, "Mommy, promise you'll find someone who makes you laugh again. Promise you'll be happy." Olivia's voice shook. "And I promised, because what else do you say to your dying child? But I never thought I'd actually have to keep that promise. Never thought there'd be someone who made happiness feel possible again." "And now? Now I'm terrified because I think you might be that person. You and Sophie. And if I lose you too, I don't think I'll survive it." Daniel pulled her close. "You survived losing Emma. You survived Marcus leaving. You survived 2 years of drowning alone. You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding on." "That's what strong looks like sometimes. Just barely holding on, but still getting up the next day." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on a couch that was too small, in an apartment that was too cramped, planning a future that might not exist past Monday. Sunday passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal. They took Sophie to a museum where she asked approximately 800 questions about dinosaurs. They had lunch at a diner where the waitress knew Daniel by name and brought Sophie extra whipped cream without being asked. They walked through the park in the afternoon sun, and Olivia tried to memorize every detail in case this was all she'd get. That night, after Sophie was asleep and Daniel was in the shower, Olivia sat in his kitchen and finally opened her email. Hundreds of messages. Board members offering carefully worded non-support. Her lawyer with a list of legal options if the vote went badly. Marcus's attorney with an offer. Resign quietly, and he'd drop the whole thing, let her leave with some dignity and tact. She was staring at that last email when Daniel emerged, hair wet and wearing sweatpants that had seen better days. "You okay?" he asked. "Marcus is offering me an out. If I resign before the vote, he'll stop the whole thing. No public fight, no humiliation, just a quiet exit." "What do you want to do?" "The smart thing would be to take it, cut my losses, move on." "I didn't ask what the smart thing was, I asked what you want." Olivia looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd shown up with soup when she forgot to eat, who'd let her cry without trying to fix it, who'd asked her to stay even though she was a disaster, who'd somehow convinced her that being broken wasn't the same as being finished. "I want to fight," she said. "Even if I lose, even if it destroys me, I want to stand in front of that board and tell them that I'm not going to apologize for being human." "Then that's what you do." "It's stupid. I'll probably lose anyway." "Probably. But at least you'll lose on your terms." She pulled up her email and typed a response to Marcus's lawyer. 3 words. Not a chance. Then she closed her laptop and turned to Daniel. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something." "What?" "You and Sophie saved my life, not metaphorically. Actually, if I hadn't met you that night, if Sophie hadn't drawn me that rainbow, I don't think I'd still be here." Daniel crossed the small kitchen and took her face in his hands. "You saved yourself. We just reminded you that you wanted to. That's not how it feels." "I know, but it's true anyway." Monday morning came too fast. Olivia put on her armor. The same sharp suit, the same careful makeup, the same tight control that had carried her through 2 years of barely surviving. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't walking into that boardroom alone. Daniel had wanted to come, but she'd convinced him to stay with Sophie. This was her fight. She needed to face it herself. The boardroom looked exactly the same as it had Thursday. Same 12 faces. Same expensive furniture. Same Marcus sitting in the corner with his lawyer, watching her like a predator waiting for prey to stumble. The chairman called the meeting to order. "We've had the weekend to consider the matter of Ms. Grant's continued leadership. We'll hear final statements, then vote." Marcus stood first. His statement was polished and devastating, each word carefully chosen to paint Olivia as unstable, unreliable, unfit. He talked about the company's future, about fiduciary responsibility, about the need for steady leadership in uncertain times. He never once mentioned Emma by name. When it was Olivia's turn, she stood without notes. Because she'd realized over the weekend that this wasn't about convincing them anymore. This was about telling her truth, whatever they decided to do with it. 2 years ago, I lost my daughter, she began. Emma. Her name was Emma, and she loved purple, and she made me promise I'd be happy again someday. I want you to know her name because Marcus has spent this entire process treating her like an inconvenient detail instead of a person who mattered, who still matters. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Olivia pressed on. You're going to vote me out today. I know that. Marcus has spent weeks building his case, and he's right about some of it. I have struggled. I have canceled meetings and worked from home and been less than perfect. But here's what he's not telling you. She pulled up a document on the screen. This is a letter from Emma. She wrote it when she was 5, right before she got too sick to hold a pencil. My assistant found it in my office files last night. The letter appeared on the screen, written in wobbly purple crayon. Dear Mommy, it said, don't be sad when I'm gone. Find happy again. Love, Emma. Olivia's voice shook, but she kept going. I've spent 2 years trying to honor that promise while also running this company. Some days I failed at both, but I kept trying. And somewhere along the way, I met someone who reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being finished, that you can grieve and still live, that happiness doesn't mean forgetting. Mom. She looked directly at Marcus. You asked me to choose between the company and my humanity, between being a perfect CEO and being a whole person. I refuse to make that choice. If you can't have a leader who's both competent and human, then you're right. I'm not the right fit, but I'm not apologizing for it. The room was silent. I've given you 10 years, Olivia continued. I built this company from nothing, took it public, made you all very wealthy in the process, and I'm still delivering results. But if that's not enough, because I also dared to have feelings and form relationships and grieve my child in ways that made you uncomfortable, then vote me out. I'll survive it. I've survived worse. She sat down. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her face neutral. The chairman cleared his throat. We'll vote now. All in favor of removing Ms. Grant as CEO? Olivia watched hands go up. 1, 2, 3. Marcus's smile grew wider. 4, 5, 6. That was it. More than half. She was done. But then something strange happened. One of the board members, Patricia Chen, who'd been on the board since the beginning, stood up. I'd like to say something before we finalize this. The chairman frowned. Mrs. Chen, we've already voted. And I'd like to explain my vote, because I voted to remove Olivia, and I was wrong. Olivia's head snapped up. Patricia looked directly at her. I lost my son 15 years ago. Car accident. He was 23. And I did exactly what Marcus is asking Olivia to do. I pretended I was fine. I threw myself into work. I never talked about him. I let people believe I'd moved on because that's what professionals do. Her voice cracked. It almost destroyed me. It destroyed my marriage. It destroyed my relationship with my daughter. Because I'd convinced myself that grief was weakness and weakness was unacceptable. She turned to the board. Olivia's doing something incredibly brave. She's refusing to choose between being effective and being human. She's showing us that you can be both. And we're punishing her for it because it makes us uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, Marcus started. I'm not finished. Patricia's voice was steel. You want to remove her because she's emotionally compromised. But I look at these numbers, and I see a CEO who increased revenue by 15% while grieving her daughter, who launched successful products while dealing with impossible pain, who showed up every single day even when I'm sure she wanted to do anything but. Well, she looked at Olivia again. I'm changing my vote. I vote to keep Olivia Grant as CEO, and I move that we issue a formal statement of support. The room erupted. Marcus was on his feet, objecting. Other board members were arguing. The chairman was calling for order. But then another hand went up. Michael Torres, one of the tech investors. I'm changing my vote too. Patricia's right. We're punishing strength, not weakness. Another hand. Another. Olivia watched in disbelief as the tide turned. Board members who'd voted against her were standing up, changing their votes, some of them apologizing. In the end, the vote was 9-3 in her favor. She kept her position. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Marcus stormed out with his lawyer. Board members wanted to talk to her, explain their votes, express support. Patricia hugged her tightly and whispered, "Your daughter would be proud." Olivia made it through the requisite handshakes and promises to discuss next steps and assurances that this was a new beginning for the company. She smiled and nodded and said all the right things. Then she left the building, got in her car, and drove straight to Daniel's apartment. He opened the door in his work clothes, clearly having just gotten home. One look at her face and he pulled her inside. "Tell me," he said. "They voted to keep me. 9-3. I won." "That's amazing. Olivia, that's incredible." She started laughing, then crying, then laughing again. "I have no idea what just happened." Patricia Chen stood up and gave this speech about her son, and suddenly everyone was changing their votes, and Marcus looked like he might have a stroke, and Daniel kissed her, stopping the flow of words. When he pulled back, he was grinning. "You did it. I didn't do anything. I just told the truth." "Yeah, that's what you did. You told the truth, and it turned out that mattered more than Marcus's manipulation." Sophie came running from her room. "Miss Olivia, did you win?" "I did, sweetheart." "I knew you would. You're like the princess with the dragon, remember? You solved your own problem." Sophie threw her arms around Olivia's waist. "Does this mean you can come to my play tomorrow?" Olivia looked at Daniel over Sophie's head. He was smiling at her like she'd hung the moon. Yeah, she said, hugging Sophie back. "I'll be there. Front row." That night, they celebrated with takeout Chinese food and Sophie's ongoing narration of every single aspect of her day. Olivia sat on Daniel's worn couch and let herself feel it, the relief, the joy, the bone-deep exhaustion of having fought and won. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. She felt like maybe, possibly, Emma would be proud of her. Not for keeping the company, not for winning the vote, but for keeping her promise, for finding happy again. Sophie's school play was exactly as chaotic as Daniel had warned her it would be. The auditorium smelled like old carpet and someone's overly enthusiastic perfume. Parents jockeyed for position with phones held high, ready to capture every moment of their children's theatrical debuts. Daniel had saved Olivia a seat in the front row, just as promised, wedged between him and Mrs. Chen, who'd brought homemade cookies and immediately started offering unsolicited opinions about the stage lighting. "They've got that spotlight too far left," Mrs. Chen muttered. "Sophie's going to be in shadow for half her lines." "She has 2 lines," Daniel said. "And she's a tree. Trees don't need spotlights. All performers need proper lighting. It's basic theater." Olivia smiled, feeling something warm settle in her chest. This was so wonderfully, perfectly normal. No board meetings, no corporate strategy, just a slightly judgmental neighbor, a nervous father, and a 6-year-old about to play a tree. The lights dimmed. The curtain opened. 20 first-graders shuffled onto the stage in various states of costume-induced confusion. Sophie stood near the back, wearing a brown shirt with green construction paper leaves taped to her arms. She spotted them in the audience and waved with both hands, causing several leaves to fall off. Daniel groaned quietly. "She's not supposed to wave." "She's perfect," Olivia said. The play was a disaster in the best possible way. Kids forgot their lines. Someone's crown fell off. A boy playing a rabbit decided mid-scene that he was now a dinosaur and had to be gently redirected by a teacher. But when Sophie delivered her 2 lines, "The forest welcomes you," and "Even trees need friends," she said them with such conviction that several parents actually applauded. Afterward, Sophie ran to them, her remaining leaves trailing behind her like a comet tail. "Did you see me? Did you see? I didn't forget my words." "You were amazing," Olivia said, catching her in a hug. "Best tree I've ever seen." Madison said trees don't have friends, but I told her my line proved they do, and she didn't have a good answer, so I think I won. "Definitely won," Daniel agreed. They took Sophie out for ice cream even though it was a school night, and she was already vibrating with post-performance adrenaline. She sat between them in the booth, explaining in exhaustive detail everything that had gone wrong backstage and how she'd helped fix it because someone had to be responsible. And then Tyler couldn't find his tail. He was a mouse, and everyone was panicking, but I remembered I saw it by the costume rack, so I got it for him and saved the whole show, basically. Basically, Olivia said, trying not to smile too wide. You should come to all my shows. We have a winter concert in December and a spring thing in May, and probably other stuff I don't remember yet. Daniel cleared his throat. Sophie, we talked about this. Miss Olivia is very busy. I'll be there, Olivia interrupted. All of them, if you want me there. Sophie's face lit up. Really? Really? That night, after they dropped Sophie off with Mrs. Chen and were walking back to Olivia's car, Daniel said, You don't have to commit to every school event. She'll understand if you can't make them all. I want to make them all. Liv, I'm serious. I spent 2 years avoiding anything that reminded me of what I lost. School plays and birthday parties and all the normal parent things that hurt too much to watch. But tonight, she stopped walking, turning to face him under a streetlight that flickered intermittently. Tonight I realized I don't have to avoid those things anymore. They still hurt, but they don't destroy me. Because Emma would have loved school plays. Would have been exactly like Sophie, waving at the audience when she wasn't supposed to. Daniel pulled her close. You're sure about this? About all of it? Because once Sophie gets attached to the idea of you being at everything, there's no going back. She'll hold you to it. I'm counting on it. They stood there under the broken streetlight while the city moved around them. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both foreign and exactly right. Olivia went back to work with a renewed focus that had nothing to do with proving herself and everything to do with actually caring about what she was building. The board, chastened by their near-catastrophic vote, gave her more autonomy than she'd had in years. Patricia Chen became an unexpected ally, often stopping by Olivia's office to share stories about her son and remind her that grief didn't have an expiration date. Marcus predictably disappeared. His lawyer sent a terse email about dropping any further action, and that was it. No dramatic confrontation, no final showdown. Just a quiet exit from someone who'd never understood that strength came in forms other than ruthless ambition. Olivia moved out of the penthouse, not because she had to, but because living in that space felt like wearing someone else's clothes. She found a smaller place in Daniel's neighborhood, still nice, but human-scaled. 2 bedrooms instead of 5. A kitchen where she actually cooked instead of ordered in. Windows that overlooked the park where she'd learned to push Sophie on the swings. Sophie helped her unpack, offering extensive advice on where everything should go. The purple blanket should go in the living room because that's where we'll watch movies, she declared. And you need to put some pictures up because walls shouldn't be empty. What kind of pictures? Happy ones, like us at the park. And maybe one of Emma so she knows you didn't forget her. Olivia's throat went tight. She'd packed exactly one photo of Emma. A candid shot from a birthday party, purple frosting on her nose, laughing at something off camera. She'd kept it wrapped in tissue paper, unsure where it belonged in this new life. You think Emma should be in the living room? She asked carefully. Sophie considered this with absolute seriousness. Yeah, because she's part of your family, and families go in the living room where everyone can see them. So that's where the photo went, on the mantel next to a picture of Sophie covered in paint from an art class, and one of Daniel looking half asleep on the couch. 3 generations of messy, imperfect love, on display for anyone who visited. Daniel came by that evening with pizza and beer and a small potted plant that he claimed was impossible to kill. It's a succulent, he explained. You water it like once a month. Even you can't screw that up. I'm choosing to ignore the implication that I'm bad at keeping things alive. You burned water last week. That was one time. Sophie, already making herself at home on Olivia's new couch, piped up. Twice. You burned it twice. Whose side are you on, Sus? Olivia demanded. Truth side. That's what you said. Always tell the truth even when it's hard. Olivia looked at Daniel. I'm being outvoted in my own apartment. Ma. Technically, it's a 2-bedroom condo, not an apartment, Sophie said. Mrs. Chen explained the difference. Of course she did. They ate pizza on the floor because Olivia's furniture hadn't been delivered yet. Sophie narrated the entire meal, as usual, moving seamlessly from a story about playground politics to a question about whether Olivia had ever climbed a tree to a declaration that purple was still the best color and anyone who disagreed was wrong. What about red? Daniel asked. Red's pretty good. Red is fine for stop signs and apples. Purple is for important things. Like what? like Emma's favorite color. And mine. So it's a connection. Sophie looked at Olivia. Do you think she can see us from wherever she is? The question landed like a stone in still water. Daniel started to intervene, but Olivia shook her head. I don't know, she said honestly. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think she knows I kept my promise. What promise? To find happy again. To not stay sad forever. Sophie nodded, satisfied. I think she knows. I think Mommy knows too. About you and Daddy and me and how we're all friends now. Friends felt like too small a word for what they were becoming, but Olivia didn't correct her. Instead, she said, I think you're right. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch and Daniel had carried her to his car, Olivia stood in her new living room and looked at the photo of Emma, at her daughter's purple frosted smile, at the joy captured in that single frozen moment. I did it, she whispered. I found happy. It's different than I thought it would be, but it's real. I hope that's okay. Zhao Said. The photo didn't answer, of course, but Olivia felt something settle inside her chest. Not peace, exactly, but acceptance. Emma was gone. That fact would never stop hurting. But the hurt didn't mean Olivia had to stop living. The holidays came faster than expected. Olivia had always hated the holidays since Emma died. The forced cheer, the family gatherings she no longer had, the constant reminders of what she'd lost. But this year, Sophie had opinions about how they should celebrate. We need a tree, she announced in early December. A real one that smells like Christmas. And we have to decorate it together because that's tradition. Whose tradition? Daniel asked. Ours. The new one we're making. So they got a tree, a slightly lopsided one from a lot 2 blocks away, sold by a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They hauled it back to Olivia's place and spent an entire evening decorating it while Sophie directed operations with the authority of a general commanding troops. The purple ornaments go on the front, she instructed, and the star goes on top but not too high because then you can't see it from the couch. Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in years, at Daniel's terrible attempts to string lights evenly, at Sophie's increasingly elaborate backstory for each ornament, at the way the 3 of them worked together like they'd been doing this forever. When the tree was finally finished, still lopsided but covered in lights and ornaments and tinsel that Sophie had applied with enthusiastic abandon, they sat on the couch and just looked at it. It's perfect, Sophie declared. It's a mess, Daniel said. Perfect mess, Olivia corrected, and meant it. She bought them all gifts, agonizing over what to get people who didn't need things. For Daniel, a new jacket because his old one had a stain he kept claiming he'd get cleaned but never did. For Sophie, an art set with every color of crayon and marker imaginable, including 17 shades of purple. And for both of them, something harder to wrap, plane tickets to the beach for a long weekend in January. Because Sophie had mentioned once that she'd never seen the ocean, and Olivia wanted to be there when she did. They spent Christmas morning at Daniel's apartment because Sophie insisted that Santa needed to know where she actually lived. Olivia arrived at 7 a.m. to find Sophie already awake and vibrating with excitement. He came! Santa came and he left presents, and also he ate the cookies we left. But he didn't drink all the milk, and Daddy says that's because Santa's watching his dairy intake, but I think maybe he just wasn't thirsty. The presents were modest. Daniel clearly hadn't had much money to spend, but Sophie treated each one like treasure. A new doll, a puzzle, a book about dinosaurs that she immediately demanded Olivia start reading aloud. When Sophie opened Olivia's gift and saw the art set, she gasped. This is the fancy kind, the kind that real artists use. You are a real artist, Olivia said. I know, but now I have the supplies to prove it. Sophie threw her arms around Olivia's neck. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Daniel's gifts were characteristically practical. A new coffee maker for Olivia, because hers had died the week before, a book he thought she'd like, a framed photo of the 3 of them at the park that he'd had printed without telling her. When did you take this? She asked, studying the image. They were all laughing at something, Sophie in the middle holding both their hands. 2 weeks ago. Mrs. Chen took it while you weren't looking. She says we look like a family. What? We do, Sophie confirmed. Obviously. Olivia looked at the photo, at their smiling faces, at the way they fit together despite having no reason to. A CEO, a maintenance worker, and a 6-year-old who'd decided they belonged to each other. Yeah, she said softly, we do. January brought the beach trip. Sophie packed and repacked her suitcase approximately 15 times, changing her mind about which stuffed animals absolutely had to come and which could stay home. The flight was her first, and she spent the entire time with her face pressed to the window, providing running commentary on the clouds and the tiny houses below, and whether the pilot would let her see the cockpit. When they finally reached the beach and Sophie saw the ocean for the first time, she went completely still. It's so big, she whispered. I didn't know anything could be that big. They spent 3 days building sandcastles and collecting shells and teaching Sophie to jump waves. Olivia got sunburned because she forgot to reapply sunscreen. Daniel stepped on a jellyfish and had to be convinced it wasn't going to kill him. Sophie declared that she was going to be a marine biologist and started a collection of very important rocks that she insisted they needed to bring home. On their last night, after Sophie had finally crashed from exhaustion, Daniel and Olivia sat on the beach watching the sunset. She's going to be impossible to deal with when we get back, Daniel said. She'll want to come here every weekend. So we'll come back. Liv, plane tickets aren't cheap. I can't. We'll figure it out. She leaned against him. That's what we do, right? Figure things out together. He wrapped an arm around her. When did you get so optimistic? When I realized that being happy doesn't mean forgetting what I lost. It just means making room for something new alongside it. They sat in silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. Finally, Daniel said, Sophie asked me yesterday if you were going to be her mom now. Olivia's heart stuttered. What did you tell her? I told her that families come in all different shapes, that you love her and I love you, and that's what matters. You love me? He turned to look at her, and his expression was so open it hurt. Yeah, I do. Have for a while now. And I know it's fast and complicated, and we're both still figuring out how to be whole people again, but she kissed him, cutting off whatever else he was going to say. When they pulled apart, she said, I love you too. You and Sophie both. And you're right. It's fast and complicated and probably a terrible idea. But I'm done being afraid of terrible ideas. So what do we do now? We go home. We keep showing up. We build something that doesn't look like what either of us lost, but might be just as good. Just as good? Maybe better, because we chose it. Because we know how precious it is. They flew home the next day with Sophie's collection of important rocks and enough sand in their luggage to build a small beach. Sophie fell asleep on the flight with her head on Olivia's shoulder, and Daniel took a photo when he thought Olivia wasn't looking. 6 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in July, they went back to the park where everything had started. Sophie was bigger now, louder, more confident. She ran ahead to the swings while Daniel and Olivia followed at a slower pace. You nervous about tomorrow? Daniel asked. Tomorrow was the anniversary of Emma's death. 3 years. Olivia had been dreading it for weeks, unsure how to mark a day that still felt both impossible and inevitable. Yeah, she admitted, but less than I thought I'd be. Is that wrong? No, it's human. They'd planned something small for tomorrow, just the 3 of them, visiting the cemetery with purple flowers and the rainbow drawing that Sophie had made specifically for the occasion. Nothing elaborate. Just acknowledgement that Emma had existed and mattered and would always be part of Olivia's story. Sophie called from the swings, demanding they watch her go higher. They stood together and watched, and Olivia felt Daniel's hand find hers. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about what comes next for us. And I think we should stop pretending this is temporary. Stop acting like you're just visiting our lives and we're visiting yours. Make it official. Olivia's pulse kicked up. Official? How? Oh, he pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring. Daniel wasn't that traditional, but a key. Move in with us, he said. For real. Not just staying over sometimes or keeping clothes in my closet. Actually move in. Build this life we keep talking about. Daniel, before you say it's too fast, I know it is. Before you say it's complicated, I know that too. But I also know that I wake up happier when you're there. That Sophie thinks of you as family. That I don't want to keep saying goodbye at the end of the night when we could just go home together. Olivia looked at the key in his hand, then at Sophie on the swings, then at the man who'd somehow convinced her that broken people could build whole lives. Your apartment is too small, she said, so we'll get a bigger place. Together. I snore. I know, I've heard you. I'm terrible at cooking. We'll order takeout. Sophie won't complain. I still have bad days. Days where I can barely get out of bed because the grief is too heavy. Then I'll bring you coffee and we'll have a bad day together. That's the whole point. Key. She took the key. Okay. Okay? Yeah, let's do this. Let's build something real. He kissed her right there in the park, and Sophie whooped from the swings, causing several other parents to look over. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie came running. Does this mean Miss Olivia is moving in? How did you... Daniel started. I heard you practicing the speech last night. You were talking to yourself in the bathroom. Privacy is dead, Daniel muttered. So she's moving in? Sophie demanded. If that's okay with you, Olivia said. Sophie considered this with theatrical seriousness. Will you bring your big TV? Sophie, Daniel tried to intervene. Yes, Olivia said. I'll bring the big TV. Then it's definitely okay. When can we start packing? They found a place in August, a 3-bedroom apartment with enough space for all of them and their combined mess. Sophie got her own room, which she immediately declared needed to be painted purple. Daniel argued for something more neutral. Sophie wore him down in approximately 48 hours. Moving day was chaos. Mrs. Chen supervised with the authority of someone who'd moved 1,000 times and knew all the shortcuts. Patricia Chen showed up uninvited with sandwiches and advice. Sophie narrated every box that got carried in, providing helpful commentary like, "That one sounds fragile," and "Daddy, you're holding that wrong." By the time the sun set on their first night in the new place, they were surrounded by boxes and exhausted, and Olivia couldn't remember the last time she'd been this happy. They ordered pizza, because of course they did, and ate it sitting on the floor of their new living room. Sophie fell asleep halfway through her second slice, and Daniel carried her to her new purple room while Olivia started unpacking the essential items. She found Emma's photo and set it on the mantel, just like in her old place. Right next to a new photo of the 3 of them on the beach, Sophie's face lit up with joy as a wave crashed around her ankles. You good? Daniel asked, coming up behind her. Yeah, I am. You sure? Because this is a lot. Moving in together, combining our lives, all of it. I know, and 6 months ago, I would have been terrified, but now... She turned to face him. Now I'm just grateful that I get to have this, that I didn't give up when it felt impossible. Emma would be proud of you. I hope so. I hope she knows I kept my promise. They stood there in their new living room, surrounded by boxes and mess and the beautiful chaos of building a life together. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise. Inside, everything was quiet except for the sound of Sophie's soft breathing from her room down the hall. Olivia thought about the night Daniel had found her with that birthday cake, crying on her penthouse floor. Thought about Sophie's rainbow drawing and the promise to not be alone. Thought about the board meeting and the kiss in the park and all the small moments that had led them here. The thing about grief she'd learned was that it didn't disappear. Emma would always be gone. That absence would always hurt. But alongside the grief, there was room for joy, for love, for a family built not from blood or tradition, but from choice and resilience and the quiet decision to keep showing up even when it hurt. She'd lost her daughter. That truth would never change. But she'd also found something else, a second chance at happiness that looked nothing like what she'd planned but felt exactly right. Daniel pulled her close, and she let herself be held. Let herself believe that broken people really could build whole lives. That rainbows really did come after the rain. That promises made to dying children could be kept in ways you never expected. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in November, Olivia woke to find Sophie standing beside the bed. It's Rainbow Day, Sophie announced. Olivia blinked sleep from her eyes. What? Rainbow Day. The day we celebrate rainbows and second chances and families that we choose. She held up a piece of paper. I made a new drawing, for all of us this time. The drawing showed 3 stick figures under a rainbow. One tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. And written across the top in Sophie's improving handwriting, "We are not alone anymore." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect." "I know. Can we hang it next to Emma's picture?" "Yes, sweetheart. We can do that." Sophie climbed into bed between them, squirming until she was comfortable. "Tell me about Emma again, the purple frosting story." So Olivia told it, the way she told it a dozen times now, about Emma's birthday party, about the frosting that got everywhere, about her daughter's laugh that sounded like bells. And she told it without crying, without the grief strangling every word, just a mother sharing memories of a child she'd loved and lost and would never forget. When the story was done, Sophie said, "I wish I could have met her." "Me too, baby. I think you two would have been friends." "Hey, obviously, we both like purple." Daniel, who'd been quiet this whole time, pulled them both close. "Should we do something special today? For Rainbow Day?" "Park," Sophie said immediately. "And then ice cream. And then we should make dinner together, even though Miss Olivia will probably burn something." "I resent that," Olivia said without heat. "It's true, though." "Still rude." "Yes." They spent the day exactly as Sophie demanded. The park was beautiful in late fall, leaves turning gold and red and scattered across the grass. They pushed Sophie on the swings and helped her collect more important rocks, and watched her make friends with a girl her age who also had strong opinions about playground hierarchy. At ice cream, Sophie ordered a purple cone, which turned out to be grape-flavored and exactly as artificial as it looked, and declared it the best thing she'd ever eaten. Daniel got chocolate. Olivia got vanilla because she was boring and didn't care who knew it. Dinner was indeed a disaster. Olivia burned the vegetables, Daniel overcooked the chicken, and Sophie's contribution of artistic cheese arrangement was more artistic than edible. They ordered Thai food instead and ate it, while Sophie explained her very detailed plan for world peace that involved mandatory playground time for all world leaders. Because if they learned to share the swings, they'd probably share other stuff too, she reasoned. "That's actually not a terrible idea," Daniel said. "I know. I'm very smart." After Sophie was in bed, Daniel and Olivia sat on their balcony with cheap wine and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. "You think we're doing this right?" Olivia asked finally. "The whole parenting thing? I think we're doing it the best we can. That's all anyone can do." "She seems happy." "She is happy. You make her happy." He paused. "You make me happy too, Mashit." "Good. Because you're stuck with me now." "Worst decision I ever made," he said, grinning. "Second worst. The worst was that jacket you bought last month." "What's wrong with my jacket?" "Everything. But I love you anyway." So they sat there under the November sky, and Olivia thought about how strange life was, how you could lose everything and somehow still find a way forward, how grief and joy could exist in the same space without canceling each other out, how broken people really could build families from the pieces. She thought about Emma's last words to her, "Promise you'll find happy again." She had. It didn't look like the happy she'd known before. It was messier and more complicated and built on a foundation of shared loss. But it was real. It was hers. And she was grateful for every imperfect moment of it. The truth was that some things couldn't be fixed. Emma was gone. Rachel was gone. Those losses would echo through the rest of their lives. But loss didn't mean the story was over. It just meant the next chapter looked different than what they'd planned. And sometimes the unplanned chapters turned out to be the best ones. Because Olivia had learned something in the 2 years since Daniel had found her crying over a birthday cake. Resilience wasn't about being strong all the time. It was about falling apart and getting back up. About accepting help when you needed it. About building connections with people who understood that broken didn't mean finished. She'd learned that love came in unexpected forms. A 6-year-old's crayon drawing. A maintenance worker's quiet presence. A board member's sudden courage. That happiness wasn't betrayal of the dead, but honoring them by living fully. That you could grieve someone forever and still find room for joy. Most importantly, she'd learned that you didn't have to choose between remembering the past and embracing the future. You could do both. You could love the daughter you lost while building a family with the people you found. You could honor promises to the dead while making new ones to the living. The rainbow in Sophie's drawing wasn't metaphorical. It was real. A reminder that storms ended, that hope persisted, that beauty emerged from pain if you were brave enough to look for it. Olivia had spent 2 years in the storm, convinced she'd drown. But she hadn't drowned. She'd learned to swim, and she'd found others swimming alongside her. Daniel, with his quiet strength, Sophie with her unshakable optimism, Patricia with her hard-won wisdom. They were building something together. Not a replacement for what they'd lost, but something new. A chosen family bound not by blood, but by understanding, by shared grief, by the decision to keep showing up even when it was hard. And that, Olivia thought as she sat on her balcony with Daniel's hand in hers and Sophie's soft breathing audible through the open window, was worth everything. The storm had passed, the rainbow had come, and she was finally, beautifully, messily home.